at mail.house.gov. Now start with my opening statement. Good morning and welcome to today's witnesses and everyone joining the Aviation Subcommittee's hearing titled Bridging the Gap, Improving Diversity and Inclusion in the U.S. Aviation Workforce. The topic of this hearing comes at a critical time for the U.S. aviation and aerospace industries. Over the last 18 months, these industries were hit particularly hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. 557 million fewer passengers flew on U.S. airlines in 2020 than in the previous year, as a for instance. The growth of aviation manufacturing was also hindered by the pandemic. By the end of 2020, the value of aircraft deliveries declined by nearly 15%. So as the nation reopens and Americans return to air travel, a discussion must be had regarding the status and needs of the aviation and aerospace workforce. And I acknowledge that I have myself more work to do to understand and address these barriers, such as systemic racism, to enable inequity and injustice that enable inequity and injustice to persist in the United States. As subcommittee chair and as a member of Congress, I've made highlighting the importance of an increasingly diverse country and what that means for the U.S. aviation and aerospace workforce. And developing an increasingly diverse workforce is a priority. It's important that the economic and job opportunities available in these industries be available and accessible to all Americans. However, in many cases, the U.S. transportation workforce does not reflect the diversity of the country. Unfortunately, the aerospace and aviation sectors are no exception. A recent survey of the industry found that women comprise 25% of the industry's workforce, while only 6% of respondents identified as a person of color and just less than 18% identified as Hispanic or Latino, according to an Aviation Week 2020 workforce study. The aviation and aerospace sectors also expect a good chunk of their workforce to retire soon. The Aviation Technician Education Council estimates that 30% of the current workforce is at or near retirement age. So to meet the increasing demand for new and skilled aviation workers, employers must expand the talent pool from which they've traditionally drawn. To fill existing and future workforce needs, several challenges must be met head-on, and today's witnesses will help this subcommittee to better understand the need for diversity in the U.S. aviation and aerospace workforce and challenges faced in their journeys to succeed in this industry. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Rebecca K. Luty, Assistant Professor at the University of Nebraska at Omaha's Aviation Institute, to share her research findings on representation in aviation and challenges to improve diversity in the sector. One such challenge is the basic lack of exposure to aviation and aerospace careers for young people, especially from minority communities and women. The federal government and industry must make a concerted effort to help promote these careers among these communities to better diversify the workforce. I'm pleased to welcome Captain Claudius Apata Cardone, Executive Director of Community Relations and Outreach for the Latino Pilots Association. Captain Apata Cardone, I look forward to hearing your story and your recommendations to enhance the talent pipeline. We're also joined by Mr. Joel Webley, Board Chair of the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, or OBAP, an organization at the forefront of creating more pathways to these careers for historically underrepresented groups. Mr. Webley, I'm interested in learning more about your expertise in aviation and OBAP's various outreach programs. In their efforts to grow the aviation workforce, employers are also faced with the skills gap. Employers have found there's a lack of skilled workers in positions requiring more than a high school diploma but less than a four-year college degree. According to a 2018 industry report, the skills gap may leave an estimated 2.4 million manufacturing positions unfilled between now and 2028, resulting in a $2.5 trillion loss in the economy. One way to address the gap is to help active duty service members and veterans to transition into well-paying careers in the aviation sector. Congress and this committee owe it to veterans to help them find pathways to the skills necessary for employment in aviation and aerospace. And I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Kyle Kaiser, President of Viper Transitions, about his organization's critical work to help veterans enter this workforce and what Congress can do to support these efforts. Underrepresented communities also face the challenge of bias when attempting to enter aviation careers. A 2020 study conducted by Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University found, quote, consumers and other pilots favored white males in all conditions, while females and minorities were viewed less favorably, That's unfortunate. The same study found such biases could deprive the aviation industry of the best job candidates. Efforts undertaken by the industry itself are critical to overcoming the challenges underrepresented groups face entering these jobs, which is why I'm pleased to welcome Ms. Isema Gibbs, Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility and Diversity, Equity, Inclusion for Jetblue Airways. So Ms. Gibbs, I look forward to hearing more about JetBlue's efforts to recruit a more diverse talent, and particularly in frontline operations and in leadership roles. The FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018 included several provisions to improve the recruitment of young people and women to careers in the aviation industry. The Youth Access to American Jobs and Aviation Task Force is responsible for providing recommendations and strategies to the FAA to encourage high school students to enroll in courses and secure apprenticeships that prepare them for an aviation career. Last year, the DOT announced 20 appointees to this task force representing a diverse range of backgrounds and expertise in aviation and education. The Women in Aviation Advisory Board is also tasked with exploring opportunities for education, training, mentorship, outreach, and recruitment of women in the aviation industry. The DOT announced the appointment of 30 members to this advisory board in May of last year. The law also established the Aviation Workforce Development Grants to fund scholarships, apprenticeships, and other outreach initiatives to expand educational opportunities for the next generation of aviation maintenance technicians, aircraft pilots, aerospace engineers, and operators of unmanned aircraft systems. So a question I have for today's witnesses generally is, are these initiatives enough? Does Congress need to do more? As the nation works towards full economic recovery, the federal government and industry must and can work together to break down barriers and ensure careers in the aviation and aerospace industries are available and accessible to all Americans. Doing so will not only boost continued economic growth, but help to ensure the long-term health of the industries themselves. So I want to thank today's witnesses for coming, and I look forward to the discussion. With that, I want to recognize the ranking member of the committee, Mr. Graves of Louisiana, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for holding this hearing today, and